Africa, continent of dreams, limitless possibility, a wealth of opportunity, and a population full of potential. But how do we turn dreams into reality, possibility into impact, and potential into access to work and economic prosperity? Africa has a significant infrastructure investment gap of $170 billion a year. The convergence of energy, transportation, and digital economies demand a new approach to infrastructure development globally. As urban growth accelerates across Africa, we believe that power, transport and logistics, natural resources, telecommunications, and heavy industries are the enablers that will deliver access to markets, job creation, and accelerated economic growth. So we pioneer solutions that help build bridges and roads and connectivity. We help develop natural resources in sustainable ways that create prosperity for more. But our roads and bridges connect more than just places, and our financing powers more than cities and grids. It connects people to opportunities, producers to markets, and local communities to the skills they need to grow. This foundation shapes our present, so we can build our new tomorrow. And what does the future hold? Africa's mandate is urgent, and the narrative has to change. So we're rewriting the script. Imagine an Africa where the world's youngest population turns into the future of the workforce, where the knowledge-based economies in Africa that power the world give birth to the fifth industrial revolution, connecting innovation to purpose and inclusivity. That's the Africa we're building. We can't do it alone, but together, perhaps we can. Our vision is to become Africa's leading infrastructure solutions provider, Africa Finance Corporation, driving social, economic, sustainable change across Africa.
Welcome to the first Africa Finance Corporation Country and Stakeholder Symposium. We have simultaneous interpretation in French and English. Just click on the interpretation button at the bottom of the Zoom screen to choose your preferred language. My name's Mark Edo, and I'll be your guide for the next couple of hours, where we will hear from some great speakers in 3 rapid sessions that will give us insights on the power of partnering with the Africa Finance Corporation to reduce infrastructure deficits, develop natural resources, and catalyze sustainable industrialization. Now, I urge you to please start sending in your questions and your comments now. Let's make this as interactive as we can. Just put your questions into the Q&A box, and please make sure you tell us your affiliation, who you're with, and who your question is directed to if you can. Now, everyone will agree that these are extraordinarily challenging times for Africa, and indeed for the world. Beyond the tragic loss of lives, this pandemic, COVID-19, has brought with it the perfect storm: currency woes, collapsed commodity prices, job losses, business closures. A year on, and supply chains continue to face huge disruptions. Just look at agriculture. From a macro point of view, most African countries are now in recession, and the continent has slipped into a contraction for the first time in more than 20 years, eroding its fiscal position. But the biggest challenge going forward is liquidity and the lack of credit. African nations simply don't have the fiscal space we see in other countries, and they can't provide that unprecedented level of stimulus that we've seen in the Western world. With investor flight to safe havens, many believe our continent is staring at a credit crisis of epic proportions. Now, more than ever, AFC can serve as a trusted partner to African nations looking to build back or forward better as they seek to keep growth on track. And we know infrastructure is key to growth. It's a growth engine. History has taught us that there exists a direct correlation between a nation's wealth, its power and development, and its levels of infrastructure. however you define it, whether it's the sustainable exploitation of natural resources or transport networks or harnessing of energy, infrastructure is the great enabler. We're told that the infrastructure gap in Africa is at least 100 billion US dollars. And that's just to keep it at the levels it is at now. To greatly improve it, that'll take trillions of dollars. I should also add that the African Continental Free Trade Area, which came into effect at the start of this year, that success of the AFCFTA will depend on the smooth and inexpensive movement of goods. In other words, countries have to have efficient and functioning infrastructure. Now, for more than a decade, AFC has proven to investors that African infrastructure projects are not only safe investments, but they can be very profitable. We'll have 3 sessions today. In the first, we'll hear from countries that are benefiting from being members of AFC. In the third session, we'll hear from some key voices from the corporation that will articulate what AFC can offer members at this crucial time. There'll be a Q&A session at the end. So as I said, please send in your questions as we go along. So let's kick things off at the top. Now, in April of last year, the Africa Finance Corporation was fortunate enough to announce a new chairman. He brought with him about 20 years of banking and financial experience, having advised 3 Nigerian presidents, a CBN governor, and having worked in the IMF in Washington. He's currently the Deputy Governor Economic Policy at Nigeria's Central Bank. I welcome Dr. Kingsley Obiora, the chairman of AFC's Board of Directors, to give the opening remarks. Sir.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you to everyone. Good morning. On behalf of the Board of Directors, management, and staff of the African Finance Corporation, it is my pleasure to welcome you all, especially our current and potential member countries, development partners, and investor community to the first AFC Country and Stakeholder Symposium. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, this symposium is being hosted by the corporation as part of its vision to be the leading infrastructure solution provider and development partner in Africa. It is our belief that the time has come for the corporation to showcase its track record in developing transformational projects and ecosystems across Africa. In addition, to engage in constructive dialogue with member countries, stakeholders, and investors on how the corporation would continue to be the partner of choice in reducing the infrastructure deficit on the continent. Indeed, this is an auspicious occasion, one that could not have come at a better time than today, as the continent is gradually recovering from the challenging impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Events such as this will help us rebuild and re-inspire confidence that amidst all the hardships we endure as humankind, we can always draw strength from each other by sharing experiences to determine a path forward in developing the continent. We believe that it is very important to engage with our stakeholders at this time to ensure that as the world gradually recovers from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, the continent is not left behind. Ladies and gentlemen, it is reassuring to note the diversity of participants at today's symposium. Certainly, it reflects the corporation's Pan-African status and assures us of our member countries' support. Finally, I would like to assure our member countries and stakeholders that we will continue to do business across the continent and offer a thought leadership platform for all African countries and stakeholders to share our ideas on how to positively impact the lives and well-being of our fellow Africans. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, with these opening remarks, I welcome you all to this symposium and look forward to an interactive session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, since its launch in 2007, AFC has deployed over $8 billion in more than 30 African states. There have been some exciting projects in areas such as wind energy. AFC seeks to impact Africa's development positively, and brings with it a commercial mindset. As we look to recover from COVID-19, I'd like to invite AFC's President and CEO, Mr. Samaila Zubairu, to touch on this as he gives the welcome address. Sir. I think perhaps your mic is off. President, if you could switch your mic.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
And thank you all, my colleagues and the board, the stakeholders, member countries. We welcome you to our inaugural symposium. I would like to take note of special guests that are with us today. The Governor of the Central Bank of Ghana, Ernest Addison, the Minister of Finance for Egypt, Dr. Mohamed Bait, the Central Bank Governor of Egypt, Mr. Tariq Ame, the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development of Zimbabwe, Mr. Thuli Mkube, the Minister of Finance for Sierra Leone, Mr. Jacob Jusu Saffa, the Minister of Mines, Industry and Development Corporation of Cameroon, Mr. Gabriel Dodo Ndoke, Assistant Sub-Governor, Central Bank of Egypt, Minathala Farid, Deputy Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, Augustus J. Flomo for Liberia, the Vice Governor, Central Bank of Guinea, Mr. Theodore Njadu So, and my brother, Professor Benedict Orama, President of Afrexim, the head of OECD Africa. Thank you all for making time to join us at this symposium. I'll start by recapping or introducing who AFC is. The Africa Finance Corporation was created as a multilateral financial institution in 2007 with the sole objective of providing pragmatic solutions to Africa's infrastructure deficit and challenging operating environment by developing and financing infrastructure, natural resource, and industrial assets that will enhance the economic growth and productivity of African states. Since our inception, we have invested over $8 billion across 32 African states, focusing on energy, transport and logistics, natural resources, heavy industries, telecoms, and technology. We were created as a public-private partnership with the idea of complementing African governments' ongoing efforts to make investments in infrastructure. Our role is really to help de-risk infrastructure opportunities in a way that we can mobilize private capital to work alongside us. We have, in the process of our activities, obtained an investment grade rating of A3 from Moody's, which helps us mobilize capital from the financial markets. Given the huge investment requirement for African infrastructure, which is currently estimated at about $170 billion and a deficit of about $100 billion annually, we know that we need to overcome this challenge in a pragmatic and consistent way, because this deficit hinders our economic growth and productivity on the continent. It doesn't allow us to trade with each other. It makes everything we do more expensive, and it takes much longer to get from one place to the other. So the whole idea of AFC is to de-risk infrastructure opportunities in a way that we can distribute these opportunities to other development partners that will invest alongside us. One of our key beliefs going into this is that Africa must industrialize, and Africa must get more value from its resources. I will give you some examples just to illustrate the point. Cocoa is estimated to be $100 billion industry, and 70% of the world's cocoa is in Africa. Our value capture is very limited at about 6 to 8% because we're producing only cocoa beans. And with that, we're exporting all the value creation outside the country. So what we do is to try and create ecosystems of connected infrastructure and industrial assets that will help us transform these commodities to finished goods that can be consumed in Africa, especially in the light of the Continental Free Trade Agreement that we're embarking on, and also for export to the rest of the world. we have built a platform called Arise Integrated Industrial Platforms that enables us to do this. We have a successful pilot out of Gabon, where we were able to increase exports, create jobs. We have now extended this to Benin, Togo, Cote d'Ivoire, Mauritania, and we're looking at active projects in Nigeria, Egypt, and Chad as well, to ensure that we are able to increase value capture of African commodities in the continent, because that is how we create jobs on the continent, and that is how we also make further contributions to lowering carbon emissions out of Africa. If you think about it, anytime we export raw materials, there's a voyage that takes them out of the continent, and if we're importing back processed goods, there's also another voyage, and the carbon emissions from those voyages can be emitted. Now, if we produce goods in Africa, we have significant renewable resources in Africa. We have significant hydro opportunities, solar and wind opportunities, and natural gas as well in the continent that has much lower carbon dioxide emissions than the fuels that exist in other parts of the world that would process these goods and bring them back into Africa. So for us, having enhanced value capture on the continent is a very important part of our strategy going forward. Our second core belief is the fact that Africa must develop its own narrative and its own agenda for the ongoing transition to green energy and to carbon dioxide and greenhouse gas reductions across the globe. Africa is the least contributor to greenhouse gas and carbon emissions, but yet we're the most impacted. So most of the floods occur on the continent. It leads to loss of lives. We have rising temperature and rising sea levels across the continent. So what we need to do is to ensure that we build resilient infrastructure going forward, and that we have programs that allow us transition to cleaner fuels using our own resources on the continent. Because using our own resources reduces carbon emissions and also reduces the emissions that come from transporting fuels into the continent for energy. Another key factor going forward for us is that Africans must be ready, to take advantage of the opportunities that have come from the COVID-19 pandemic, which has really ravaged the whole globe, and is making us all rethink the global supply chains across the globe. Africa must now produce goods that it needs within its jurisdiction. It must utilize most of its resources, and it must produce the equipment that it needs to keep safe. So we must look at our healthcare infrastructure and ensure that we have a minimum level of capacity going forward on the continent. Reflecting on the past year and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the continent, I think we have significant opportunities to build back better, and we will do so working with our various partners. We have the opportunity of coming to this with innovation and pragmatism and thinking of how to ensure that we have better value capture of our resources going forward. AFC will continue to play an important role working with governments. Like I mentioned, African governments remain the largest investors of infrastructure development on the continent, but they are not able to do it alone, especially with the competing needs for their resources now arising from the COVID-19 pandemic. There's significant need for liquidity, to address the healthcare challenges and to assuage the economic crisis that has been fostered upon us. Like Mark mentioned in the opening address, we have our first recession in over 20 years, and that has significant strain of resources for the African continent. And we need to ensure that AFC will continue to act as partners together with our other development partners to produce vaccines, ensure that we have proper access to vaccines and all the other PPE requirements that we need to manage this and other similar crises going forward. I would stop here, but before that, I will thank my team. AFC has a wonderful team. We have some of the best professionals on the continent. On several visits, I keep hearing about compliments on how well the team does in working with the sponsors and government to transform ideas and opportunities to brownfield projects. So I want to say a big thank you to them for all they continue to do to move our continent forward. I thank our board for their continued support and belief in our vision to make a positive change on the continent. I also thank our member countries and our prospective member countries for the opportunity that they've given us to de-risk opportunities within their domains to be able to mobilize additional capital into the continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, as you heard, the Africa Finance Corporation from the president there is doing a lot across Africa. In fact, it expects to more than double its lending this year in a bid to help African countries recover from the coronavirus pandemic. Now, with more than $4 billion of investment last year alone, AFC has a strong pipeline of projects which have been built on the back of its unrivaled access to governments and its unique project development capabilities. Between now and 2023, AFC aspires to expand its balance sheet to $10 billion. And now one exciting project that illustrates AFC's commitment to infrastructure development is the Gabon Special Economic Zone, which AFC invested $140 million in 2016. It's now rebranded as Arise, and it's a partnership with Olam and the Republic of Gabon. We'll soon meet the partners in the next session in a few minutes, but first, I want to show you a short film that tells you more about this very exciting project. I'll ask our technical guy, Solly, please roll the video if you can, Solly.
This is Africa, a continent that's brimming with resources. 70% of the world's cocoa, 53% of the world's cashew, 2/3 of the world's copper cobalt, half of the world's manganese. It all comes from Africa. But these resources don't bring in as much revenue back to Africa. Majority transformation of African resources happens in other continents. Africa's growth is also daunted by challenges like poverty, unemployment, and income inequality. Together, we can fight these problems. Together, we can arise. Arise was born in Africa in 2010 with a vision to empower African economies and generate jobs, whilst keeping Mother Nature and our shareholders forever smiling. We don't just build infrastructure to achieve our vision. We create ecosystems that empower communities, governments, and economies to solve problems. Like we did in Gabon, a country on the west coast of Africa. In 5 short years, we developed a special economic zone and ports for mineral, containers, and general cargo. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. For instance, apart from building an SEZ for the timber processing industry, we created an ecosystem for it to flourish, starting with developing log supply through third-party contractors and sustainable plantations, to building a log rail with an unloading and storage facility for end-to-end logistics. We also organized trade shows for hosted companies to showcase and market their timber products. It's not just infrastructure, it's more, it's bigger, a complete growth ecosystem. We witnessed a similar growth in the mining industry too, all by connecting the untapped mines of Gabon to the rest of the world. While the new 5 million metric ton mineral terminal built in 2015 helped, railway sidings and rolling stock for transporting the minerals caused the real impact. We even connected the mines and the neighboring rural communities with electricity. Now that there's light, there's a bright future for Gabon, a bright future for Africa. At Arise, we envision to impact the entire continent, to generate over 4 million jobs in all of Africa, to create industrial zones like we're setting up in Côte d'Ivoire, Togo and Benin, to construct ports like the one taking shape in Mauritania and Côte d'Ivoire. At Arise, we don't just build to survive. We create ecosystems to thrive. We were born in Africa. We understand African problems. We're committed to growing sustainably. And we won't stop at building just infrastructure, because we are Arise, the builder of ecosystems.
See, I told you, very exciting project there, Arise. Now, as I said, the Gabon Special Economic Zone is a partnership between AFC, OLAM, and Gabon. It's a perfect case study to explore. So we've invited the partners to join us for this next session. I'm pleased to welcome to moderate this session, Africa Finance Corporation's Executive Director for Financial Services, Sanjeev Gupta. It's a quick 15-minute session, so I'll be on hand to serve as the timekeeper, and I will implore, in fact, no, I'll beg the speakers to be very brief with their answers and concise. Sanjeev, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mark, and I hope you can hear me. Good morning to everybody from Africa Finance Corporation. Gagan, you are here. Laisha, you are here. You can hear me clearly. Don't see Gagan yet. Okay. Right. Mark, if you can find out if Gagan has been disconnected in the meanwhile, I'll start the discussions. Laisha, welcome to this session. And obviously, from an AFC point of view, I don't need to tell you, you know it already, that Gabon is one of our most spectacular success stories in terms of how us as an institution have engaged with you and your government and built what is perhaps one of the most important case studies in terms of how infrastructure should be developed on the continent. And I'm pleased to say that ever since Gabon became a member in 2011, the series of engagements that we have had with you and your government, leading to obviously the success of Arise, also led to the government of Gabon investing in AFC. So they are now not only a member country, but also a shareholder. So thank you for that, and thank you for that support. But Laisha, let me just ask you that from a vision point of view, around about 7 or 8 years back, what was the thinking in the government around developing its core industry, and how did it see itself playing a role alongside multilaterals like us and private sector companies like OLAM?
Okay. Bonjour à tous. Oui, donc je suis Laetitia Winang, je suis conseiller du président de la République. Et j'ai eu la chance, en termes de retour d'expérience, j'ai eu la chance en fait de venir du secteur privé. J'ai eu la chance par le passé de faire partie de toute l'histoire, de commencer par travailler pour Gabon Special Economic Zone et ensuite pour Arise. Et j'ai rejoint maintenant le cabinet du président de la République il y a près d'1 an maintenant. Et à ce titre, c'est vrai que j'ai vu tout ce passage et pour moi, je pense que ça a été une expérience très enrichissante d'avoir eu tous les partenaires qu'on a eus. L'histoire nous a montré que, bon, c'est vrai qu'à plusieurs reprises, le Gabon a tenté de lancer des projets pour initier des zones économiques spéciales, mais malheureusement, pour multiples raisons, ces projets n'ont pas eu lieu. C'est finalement en 2011, avec l'appui de partenaires privés tels qu'au départ Gabon Spécial, le partenariat public-privé, bon, Marc parlait tout à l'heure de OLAM et de AFC, mais il faut dire qu'il y avait aussi également la République gabonaise dans ce partenariat public-privé. Et c'est à ce titre qu'on a réussi ensemble à lancer ce projet qui est aujourd'hui magnifique parce que c'est un exemple dans toute l'Afrique. Il s'avère qu'au départ, ce projet a commencé et c'est intéressant parce que dans le reportage, on parlait des ressources naturelles qui ne sont pas suffisamment valorisé. Et le point de départ était véritablement quand, en 2010, le président de la République a décidé l'interdiction d'export de grumes au Gabon. Et ça a été vraiment ça le point de départ. Et ça nous a poussé à avoir une ressource qu'on devait transformer dans le pays. Et c'est vrai qu'ensuite, il y a eu tout un écosystème qui a été mis en place, un écosystème juridique, la zone économique spéciale qui a été mise en place avec la loi sur les zones économiques spéciales à travers tous les avantages fiscaux et douaniers qui ont été octroyés à toutes les entreprises qui venaient. Et je pense qu'aujourd'hui, le succès, je pense qu'il y a 4 ou 5 éléments qui ont permis vraiment le succès de la zone économique spéciale. Il y a le fait qu'effectivement, le président ait déclaré cette ressource comme une ressource qui devait être transformée sur place. Le fait qu'on ait trouvé un partenaire privé pour nous aider à développer cette zone économique spéciale, parce que c'est là où toutes les ressources de G16 ont vraiment permis le développement, l'attraction d'investisseurs privés au Gabon. Ensuite, il y a eu le guichet unique, parce qu'aujourd'hui, si vous allez au sein de la zone économique spéciale de Ntok, vous avez un guichet unique qui rassemble toutes les administrations, parce que pour un investisseur qui vient de l'étranger, c'est quand même pas aisé de composer avec notre administration africaine qui est toujours très lourde, et surtout dans nos pays francophones qu'il faut comprendre. Et donc, il y a ce guichet unique-là qui permet aussi de vraiment attirer et de permettre aux entreprises nouvellement installées dans la zone de se concentrer sur leur activité au lieu de devoir à chaque fois aller dans tout plein d'administrations. Ensuite, en termes de succès, je parlerai aussi de tout l'écosystème qui a été mis en place à travers, on parlait de la logistique, le transport, l'approvisionnement de grumes. On a toute la chaîne sur place, de telle sorte que, encore une fois, l'investisseur qui arrive pour transformer le bois peut se concentrer sur son activité propre. Ensuite, après, c'est vrai que l'administration a été là. On a créé, à l'époque, on avait créé, je pense qu'il est toujours en place aujourd'hui, un steering committee, un comité de pilotage entre le secteur privé et le secteur public qui remontait spontanément toutes les difficultés rencontrées. Et donc, c'est comme ça, c'est grâce à ça qu'aujourd'hui, on a pu créer cette zone. Et aujourd'hui, le Gabon est devenu le troisième exportateur de bois de plaquage sur le continent, disons même dans le monde. Donc, je pense qu'il y a tous les éléments, et c'est vrai que je pense que les partenaires qu'on a rencontrés ont été là au bon moment quand le Gabon était prêt pour ça. Et c'est vrai qu'aujourd'hui, on est content d'avoir un partenaire tel que AFC qui est très agressif, qui est prêt à prendre des risques et qui aujourd'hui a permis non seulement le développement de la zone économique spéciale, mais également le port. Disons, on a les 2 ports dont on parlait tout à l'heure dans la vidéo, à savoir le port général cargo, le port minéralier. Aujourd'hui, AFC également dans l'aéroport, AFC également dans d'autres projets miniers dans le pays. Et c'est vrai que nous, on a élaboré un plan de transformation à horizon 2023. Et je pense et j'espère que notre partenaire AEC sera prêt également à suivre ce train-là. On a un beau portfolio de projets qu'on pourrait développer ensemble en matière énergie. On parlait tout à l'heure du gaz. Le gaz, malheureusement, notre ressource n'est pas suffisamment valorisée. Donc, on attend des partenaires sur le gaz et sur tout plein d'autres projets. Donc, voilà aujourd'hui un peu en termes de retour d'expérience ce que je voudrais partager. Après, je reste ouverte un peu aux différentes questions, mais je pense que le partenariat public-privé qui a été mis en place avec AFC, avec OLAM et avec la République gabonaise a été plus que gagnant pour les 2 parties. Et j'espère qu'on continuera, AFC continuera à être dans le Gabon, à participer, à continuer à investir au Gabon pendant plusieurs années. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Lecia. I think it'll be our pleasure and privilege to work more with you and your government and do more of the development work in Gabon. That goes without saying. And as we know, there is this ancient African proverb which says that if you want to go fast, you go alone. But if you want to go far, you take partners. And I think this collaboration between ourselves as AFC, yourselves as the government of Gabon, and Olam is a good example of what partnerships can do and why Africa needs partnerships. I think Gagan is back. So let me come to you, Gagan. So Gagan, let me try and visualize this. Not very long back, 7 or 8 years back, a young, ambitious Gagan Gupta comes to Africa, comes to Gabon. What does he see? What was his mandate then? And how did he manage to bring all these parties together to create what is a magnificent site, which we saw just now, which is the Arise platform? Gagan, are you there? Okay, Gagan's having a lot of technology problem this afternoon. So whilst we still wait for Gagan to come in and hopefully answer my question, Laisha, Gagan, could you hear what I asked? Welcome back. Do you want me to repeat what I said?
Sorry, I couldn't hear fully. If you can, no,
so
I couldn't
Gagan,
hear fully.
All
if you
I
can
was
repeat,
saying
that'll be
is,
great.
So all I was saying is, here you were a few years back, not so long back, a young, ambitious senior executive from Olam arrives in Gabon with a mandate, looks at the opportunities, sees the vision of the government of Gabon, and works alongside AFC to make this Arise platform a reality. How did it all happen? Give us a quick 3-minute snapshot of everything that you saw then and how you made it all happen. Right, Gagan is definitely challenged this afternoon with his technology plate. So Laisha, whilst we wait for Gagan, maybe I should come back to you with a follow-on question. And that is, given what you exactly explained to us, the role that the government of Gabon played in facilitating this partnership, in removing the obstacles that usually come when it comes to developing infrastructure in most countries, not just in the African region. So what would your advice be to other multilaterals like us, or other investors like Olam, or other governments around how they can exploit and utilize the natural resources better?
Pour répondre à cette question, je dirais que déjà, il faut identifier, il faut avoir, c'est vrai que le président de la République a eu une vision claire, disons, il a eu une vision claire sur le bois, et il s'est dit que c'était la ressource. Disons, le Gabon exploite le bois maintenant depuis des dizaines, disons, on est à quasiment 70 années d'exploitation forestière derrière nous. Donc, c'est vrai qu'il faut avoir une vision claire et il ne faut pas avoir peur de prendre des fois des décisions très, très brutales, très, très, très dures. Parce que c'est vrai que quand en 2010, le président Bongo a décidé l'interdiction d'export de grumes hors du pays, c'est vrai que toutes les sociétés pétrolières, toutes les sociétés forestières qui étaient sur le marché ont dit que c'était la fin pour elles et qu'elles allaient devoir licencier. Mais en fait, c'est là où on s'est rendu compte que les gens ont des ressources, les sociétés ont des ressources, et si on les accompagne, si on met le cadre juridique autour de tout ça, elles peuvent se développer. Et c'est comme ça qu'avec la loi qui a été prise ensuite l'année d'après, en 2011, pour créer les zones économiques spéciales, ça a vraiment permis le développement. Et pour répondre plus précisément à votre question en disant qu'est-ce que les États doivent faire, c'est encore une fois, les États ne peuvent pas se mettre dans tout, mais les États doivent créer l'écosystème qui permette d'attirer les investisseurs. Et c'est ce qu'on a tenté de faire avec cette loi qui a motivé les uns et les autres à venir. Aujourd'hui, disons, on travaille toujours main dans la main avec la zone économique spéciale ou avec les autres projets pour faire en sorte qu'on essaie d'enlever un peu tous les bottlenecks, tous les points de blocage pour voir comment répondre au mieux aux demandes des différents investisseurs, disons. Et vraiment, comme je disais tout à l'heure, l'exemple du guichet unique a été le meilleur exemple pour encore une fois que l'investisseur qui arrive dans un pays puisse se concentrer sur son activité propre et ne doivent pas passer sa vie à essayer de trouver des financements, à essayer de obtenir des autorisations d'emploi, des licences pour des permis forestiers. Ça permet vraiment, il faut vraiment que les pays réussissent à identifier dans comment on dit, les bottlenecks pour ne pas que les entreprises derrière se retrouvent bloquées, se retrouvent avec des difficultés particulières et qu'elles elles finissent par quitter le pays parce qu'elles sont découragées.
Lecia, you know, I can't thank you enough for what you said just now, because I think this is exactly the textbook around which we need to operate, that governments have a big role to play in creating the environment, the whole legal framework, facilitate and remove the loopholes or the obstacles that come one's way. So government does have a big role to play, but it's also then up to the private sector like the OLAMs of this world and the multilateral institutions like the AFCs of this world to develop the projects so that it achieves its strategic and commercial objectives, which is why it's a win-win. I'm sorry that Gagan couldn't be here with us, but Samaila, I'm sorry, I'm going to intrude on you now. If you are there, would you just mind telling the audience quickly what this Gabon project meant for AFC and how we managed to successfully collaborate so well between Gabon, the government of Gabon, and OLAM?
Thank you, Sanjeev. Very quickly, you know, the idea was how could we expand the revenue base of the country, looking at forestry and looking at mining. So it was, how do you debottleneck those operations as they exist within the country with a view to creating efficiency and promoting exports as well as job creation within the country. So the first thing was to debottleneck the entire forestry operation or industry in the country. Before, you needed to have your own forest or forest allocation to be able to export logs of wood. So we worked with the government to change that law. And then they created a single window within the integrated industrial zone that we built to facilitate export. And then, of course, we were looking at how do we enhance the infrastructure that existed in the country. So we started by building 3 ports. We built a general cargo port, a mineral port, and a container port, and expanded the capacity of the rail tracks that was bringing goods from the hinterland to those ports. And again, I mentioned the reforms in customs, in import rules, and a general fiscal regime that will facilitate export. So having put that in place, you created the industrial park, whereby the goods could be processed. You enhance the yield of the timber, because by having the industrial park, you can have several players within that zone. So things like offcuts, you know, can be used for knives, used for coasters. You know, the timber is processed into veneer, into furniture. So Gabon is now one of the largest exporters of veneer in the world. Exports have increased 4-fold. Over 26,000 jobs have been created. So is to look at what are the constraints that exist today? How can we create efficiencies? What government policies will be required to drive those efficiencies? What is the investments that will be required to drive those? So it's a classic example of proper risk allocation, you know, between the government doing what it can, which is licensing and permitting, as well as private sector, you know, doing what it can, which is providing finance, taking financial risk, and also taking operational risk. But government stayed with the political risk and the permitting risk. So this allocation, you know, facilitated the growth and development of at that time, Gabon Special Economic Zone, which has since grown into Arise Ports and Logistics, with the ports in Gabon, construction projects in Cote d'Ivoire and Mauritania, as well as the industrial platforms, which is the industrial zones, operating in Gabon at Inkok, now with projects in Benin and Togo, as well as Cote d'Ivoire, and prospects in Senegal as well. I mean, last week we were asked to look at that Senegal project and see how we could fast track it. I mentioned earlier on that there are prospects in Nigeria, focusing on cashew, focusing on cotton, focusing on palm oil as well as a pharmaceutical city that is under contemplation. And generally agri-processing in the country. Also, there are prospects for mining. So it's quite a very grand project that we're looking at in Nigeria. In Chad, we're looking at livestock and cotton. In Egypt, we're looking at cotton. In Senegal, we're looking at as well cotton and agri-processing. So it's always around a commodity. How can you enhance value in the supply chain? And how can you build the infrastructure that's required to de-risk those opportunities? Because you can't really access those opportunities without the infrastructure. So we build infrastructure and we create efficiencies.
Thank you. Samala, you have captured the essence of the whole strategy so well. Thank you for that, and thanks for filling in for Gagan. I know it's very much a pet project for you as well. But I think what I want the audience to appreciate is here is a live example of a core product, timber, which Gabon has historically always exported, suddenly finding its way into processing, and it enhanced the export earnings of the country, it created jobs for the country, and it enhanced the tax revenues of the country. And most importantly, the point you touched on, Samala, is so profound, that it has created its own positive momentum regionally, because regionally there is confidence in what can be achieved, and the positive impact of this particular success will obviously be felt over time. So I think that is what this particular example and this particular experience has told us, that things can be done, things can be de-risked, and partners can work together, focusing on their own core competencies. And that's what this is about. Mark, if it's okay with you, I'll hand it back to you. I'm mindful of the time. Leisha, thank you so much again. And Samala, thank you very, very much for filling in.
Thank you, Sanjeev. You're not off the hook yet, and we still have another panel for you. But I want to show people another great example of the transformational partnerships that can be found with AFC. This one is in Djibouti. AFC has been working with the Djibouti Ports and Free Zones Authority, or DPFZ, to develop a wind power project. It's Djibouti's first privately financed independent power plant, and it's revolutionary. Just listen to what the DPFZ chairman, Abubakar Omar Hadi, has to say about the support that he's received, that Djibouti's received from AFC to make this groundbreaking project a reality. Solly, please roll that video.
I'd like to use this opportunity to thank my friends from AFC for organizing this symposium and for inviting me to participate as a key speaker. Regarding advisory service, we have been working with African Finance Corporation, dedicated team, on our projects, including Djibouti Ship Repair Yard, and has reached the final approval step. We have been able to push forward a wide variety of projects of critical importance for our socio-economic development, with the support of AFC experience, recommendations, and guidance that has held to sound decisions. Most importantly, mutual trust and good working spirit paved the way for the development of the first ever wind project farm that will enormously contribute to the development of our country. But I want to add one more word. Africa Finance Corporation. I always said to many of my friends from Africa Finance Corporation, your project is more popular than your name. You are keeping low profile. Why? You have African must know, African economic countries, entities must know who you are, Africa Finance Corporation. Thank you.
Yes. Well, maybe it's a good thing for your work to speak for yourself, right? I mean, that's what we all want. But that was a great validation of the work that you all do at AFC. Now, AFC's president, Soumaïla Zubair, has just returned from Senegal, where the corporation is helping the country realize several major infrastructure projects. They had a groundbreaking ceremony for a 300 megawatt gas power project, which AFC is co-developing. It'll be the largest IPP project in Senegal, apparently, and it's set to reduce the cost of energy in the country by up to 25%. Mr. Zubair and his team met with a lot of people there, ministers and a number of other people, but they met with Senegal's president as well, Macky Sall, to formally introduce AFC and to discuss AFC's activities in the country. Here is President Macky Sall welcoming AFC's Soumaïla Zubair. Solly, please roll that video.
En même temps, AFC pour aussi son engagement en faveur du Sénégal. Le Sénégal lui-même est devenu membre il n'y a pas longtemps, membre de AFC, qui est un instrument bancaire africain, pour l'Afrique, pour les Africains. Je voudrais féliciter le CEO de AFC pour son engagement en faveur de la SAR dans le cadre de sa restructuration et surtout pour vraiment la syndication, pour permettre à la SAR de se mettre à jour et de faire face à son destin. Et je sais également que vous travaillez avec Petrosen Aval et le réseau gazier sénégalais. Dans la transition énergétique, tout cela montre que vraiment les perspectives sont très importantes pour le Sénégal et pour différents groupes. Je voudrais vous encourager.
There you have it, President Macky Sall. Now let's hear from some of the country members. I'll hand back to Sanjeev Gupta, Executive Director of Financial Services, AFC, who's going to have a quick dialogue with representatives from Senegal and also from Ghana. Both are AFC country members. Back to you, Sanjeev.
Thank you very much, Mark. And I just hope that we can avoid the problem we had with one of the speakers in the previous panel. Do we have the two representatives, Solomon and the gentleman from Senegal? Okay. Right. So, Solomon, how are you doing? Good to see you again. Always a pleasure. And Mr. Ndiaye, how are you, sir? Good to see you.
Bonjour.
Hello. Good. So, thank you. So, if you will allow me, in the interest of time, let's just get straight to some of the key points that I think we would like us to discuss. So I'll start with you, Solomon, if I may, because you are, after all, a person with some unique credentials. You were one of the pioneer staff around which AFC was originally created and built. So you have seen AFC from inception, initially as a pioneer staff, then, of course, as a representative of a very important member country called Ghana. Subsequently, Ghana became a shareholder in AFC. So that also is a hat that you wear, looking after your commercial interests as an investor in AFC, and also as a voice in Africa, as far as infrastructure development is concerned. I mean, your voice reaches many, many corridors. So what has been your experience, Solomon, in seeing the evolution of AFC and where we are going? Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sanjeev, my good friend, and good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Yes, you're right. I have probably a very unique perspective in terms of Ghana and AFC. I spent 7 very happy years as the Deputy CEO and the Chief Investment Officer at Africa Finance Corporation. So I would say a number of key things. Firstly, given the close relationship between Ghana and Nigeria, both physically, geographically, and also culturally, it makes sense for Ghana and AFC to have a very close relationship. It took a while for the relationship to really mature, but Ghana was one of the early members into the AFC, and also as you mentioned, one of the early shareholders, and we're hoping to further increase our shareholding in AFC over time. I think there's a couple of points that I would highlight. Firstly, mutual interest. Ghana is always looking to develop further its infrastructure deficits, and it's looking for investors of knowledge and expertise, probably more than just the money, but also the ability to structure and create solid investments. I think the second thing is that AFC brings an African perspective. So most of our infrastructure financing, because it's long-term, usually in our local capital markets is not as developed as perhaps, say, some other countries. A lot of our infrastructure financing is from international financiers. So it's very good to have an African perspective and an African investor in Ghana as well. I think the third thing that I would say is looking at the world in the same eyes. I now represent as the CEO of the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund, which is Ghana's own investment vehicle for driving infrastructure investments into the country. So I'm busy trying to replicate in many respects what AFC has pioneered across the continent, making infrastructure that gives good returns, attracts good financing, good for the country, and also raises the funding necessary to complete the transactions. So having a partner now at AFC that sees the world the same way, Afrocentric, but also making sure that our projects can attract international financing to the highest standards, it's a natural partnership and relationship. And the final point that I would make is that we have a long pipeline of potential projects going forward. There's some new infrastructure innovations in Ghana that we want to push. And quite honestly, I can't think of a better partner than AFC for us to work with as we establish toll roads, as we further the port expansions in Ghana, as we look further at the energy sector, all areas that AFC has made significant investment in Ghana in as well. And that hasn't been lost on the government of Ghana as well. AFC has brought its balance sheet to Ghana as well as its expertise. So I think the relationship is extremely strong, very strong foundation, and I think the future between us should be great.
Thank you, Solomon, for those extremely gracious words from you. Yes, you're right. The partnership with Ghana continues to grow from strength to strength. I think on last count, AFC probably has invested close to $1 billion across various projects in Ghana. So that just tells you what one can do when there is willingness on both sides. You said that you would like to create another AFC. We may be able to charge you to help you to create that as an advisory client. But jokes apart, it's great news to know that similar organizations are drawing inspiration from AFC, because to us, these are additional partners that we wish to work with, because the challenge in Africa is not going to be solved by one institution. It needs partners as we go along. Mr. Ndari, good afternoon and good morning. It depends on which part of the world you're in, sir, today.
Merci.
Obviously, from our side, we are delighted that Senegal became a member towards the end of 2019. And then, of course, the engagement and the enthusiasm with which the Senegalese government has spoken to us about its various plans has therefore allowed us to think about the immediate projects that we can develop in Senegal. We saw the video which showed President Samaila's visit to your country, and we announced the 300 megawatt combined cycle gas turbine power project, which is a major project in Senegal and likely to be a transformational project. So we're obviously delighted that we are going to be the developer and the lead arranger alongside you. But let me ask you, sir, when you, as the government of Senegal, joined AFC, what were your expectations? And how do you see those expectations being met by us? Over to you, sir.
Merci beaucoup. Je salue tous les panélistes. Et je voudrais d'abord vous exprimer au nom du ministre de l'économie, du plan et de la coopération du Sénégal toute la satisfaction de notre pays d'avoir été invité à ce symposium d'échange avec les pays membres de AFC. C'est un honneur pour le Sénégal d'intégrer AFC à la suite de notre adhésion, comme vous l'avez rappelé tout à l'heure, en fin décembre 2019. Le ministre avait souhaité lui-même prendre part à cet événement, mais malheureusement, son agenda a été perturbé par le programme du président de la République durant cette journée. Et il m'échoit l'honneur à son nom de prendre part à ce symposium. Et c'est pour dire que le Sénégal se réjouit vraiment d'avoir intégré AFC, parce que nous, notre stratégie de financement, c'est pas d'exclusivité, mais également pas d'exclusion. Donc, quand on adhérait à l'AFC, nos attentes, c'était des solutions fast-track, parce que le président de la République, son excellent Macky Sall, a l'habitude de le dire. Il faut qu'on accélère les choses pour améliorer très rapidement le bien-être des populations. Donc, nous attendions la célérité, des solutions également adaptées qui sont alignées par rapport aux besoins du pays. Et ça, on a commencé à le vivre avec quelques projets et quelques expériences d'AFC. Donc, vous regardez, vous avez vu la célérité avec laquelle AFC a pu structurer le financement du projet de la centrale de gaz de 300 MW porté par des sponsors locaux, notamment West Africa Energy. Donc, cet accompagnement de l'entrepreneuriat africain, c'est fondamental. Ça fait partie également de nos attentes. Parce que peut-être certainement on y reviendra. Nous venons de valider notre plan de relance qu'on appelle plan d'action prioritaire ajusté et accéléré, dans lequel la part du secteur privé représente 39%. Et nous implorons vivement que le secteur privé local soit impliqué. Donc, l'expérience du genre AFC West Africa Energy est une expérience qui vise à consolider cette orientation. Donc, nous regardons également l'implication d'AFC dans d'autres projets pour résoudre le gap infrastructurel. Le président l'a dit tout à l'heure, vous l'avez rappelé, le réseau gazier, AFC est impliqué, même avec une contribution dans la phase de développement. Donc, les attentes, c'était vraiment une implication pour accompagner dans la préparation des projets, parce que ça, c'est un véritable handicap dans nos pays. Souvent, les projets ne sont pas bien préparés, n'arrivent pas à maturité, au point que ça impacte négativement sur les financements, la longueur des process et autres. Donc, le prêteur qui s'implique en amont pour apporter une contribution, aider à bien développer le projet, je pense que c'est un aspect très important. Et ça également, on l'a vu avec AFC dans le projet réseau gazier. Donc, globalement, je pense que c'était ça les attentes quand on adhérait à AFC et nous avons commencé à vivre ces expériences et nous osons espérer que la collaboration entre le Sénégal et AFC sera assez fructueuse au regard des premiers pas qui ont été posés. Merci.
Thank you very much, sir. You know, in so many ways, you reiterated and re-embellished some of the points that was made in the earlier panel when we heard from the government of Gabon representative that they believe that the reason for the success of the projects in that country was because the government played the right facilitating role whilst allowing institutions to play the role that they are designed for, which is to structure projects properly, to think through the risks that every project has, and to be able to find solutions to manage those risks so that it ultimately is what we all want it to be, which is a win-win. So I think that is great insight from you, sir, that you've already seen that happening in terms of the conversation that we are having with you and your government. Let me quickly come to you, Solomon, and I'm mindful of time, we'll wrap it up. Just a quick comment from you, final comment from you. What would your advice be to both member states and non-member states alike in Africa around solving their infrastructure challenges? How do you think they should engage with AFC?
Right. I think it's very important, and I always say this initially, when you're looking at infrastructure projects, when you're looking at infrastructure projects in your country, to determine whether they are the type of infrastructure projects where private sector financiers will be interested, or are they more on the public sector side. Once you determine that they have a place, there's appetite for private sector, i.e. the infrastructure generates cash flows, then you want to make sure that you structure your projects such that you can attract that financing. And it's always good to work with an institution that has had experience of raising financing, getting people to write checks in our countries. And I would say, if you want to get the best out of an institution like AFC, get them to help you raise financing for the important infrastructure projects in your country. And I think the other good thing about AFC is they come with their balance sheet. So they will also participate. So that will give the country confidence and will also give the potential financiers a comfort and confidence. And the third thing to say is almost like a kind of like a positive negative thing. If AFC tends to tell you that this particular project won't work in terms of trying to raise financing from the private sector, usually listen to them, because they usually know what they're talking about, and you think of different ways to then approach those particular investments. But the key thing is use their expertise and use their money, I think is the best advice I would give countries.
Thank you so much, Solomon. Absolutely. I mean, three things that we do take pride in bringing. One is our track record and therefore the expertise and experience. The second is the ability to bring money to play. So it's not just advice we are bringing. And thirdly, to mobilize other funds from other parts of the world to work alongside our money. Because once you put your money where your mouth is, there is more trust and faith in the projects that we then try and mobilize money for. So that's exactly where we see our strengths. Before I finish, Mr. Ndiaye, just to come back to you one last time, sir. I know that we are already talking to the Senegalese government around a couple of other projects. We are also talking to your government and your central bank around providing you with certain currency lines, sovereign lending facilities. But if I was to ask you, what would be your topmost wish list in terms of how AFC can engage more proactively with you? Which project would be your favorite one for us to look at?
Merci beaucoup, Sanjay. Peut-être, je serais tenté de vous dire que dans nos pays, tout est urgent. Dans nos pays, tout est urgent. Avant la crise de la COVID-19, nos pays ont connu un retard infrastructurel important. C'est pourquoi le président de la République, son Excellence Macky Sall, dans la première phase de mise en œuvre de son plan Sénégal émergent, a mis l'accent sur la résorption du gap infrastructurel. Donc, durant cette deuxième phase, il y a eu beaucoup d'investissements publics qui ont été faits par l'État avec l'accompagnement des partenaires. Vous savez également que nos pays ont des contraintes budgétaires, des contraintes de ressources, ce qui fait que durant la deuxième phase, on a plus misé sur le développement du secteur privé, son implication dans le financement du développement. Au point d'amorcer cette deuxième phase, il y a eu la crise de la COVID qui a fait naître de nouveaux enjeux, notamment dans le secteur de la santé, avec la nécessité de relever les plateaux médicaux de nos hôpitaux. Donc, au point que le gouvernement a été amené à procéder à l'ajustement du deuxième plan d'action prioritaire qui est devenu aujourd'hui plan d'action prioritaire ajusté et accéléré pour adresser vraiment quelques défis de souveraineté alimentaire, de souveraineté sanitaire, de souveraineté pharmaceutique, mais également de transformation industrielle et numérique. Et quand on parle de transformation industrielle, le Sénégal mise sur une stratégie basée sur le développement de plateformes industrielles qui assurent connectivité, qui assurent la fonctionnalité, qui assurent la compétitivité à toute entreprise qui vient s'installer. Et dans ces plateformes, on en a deux catégories. Il y a les zones économiques spéciales où il faut que l'État fait les aménagements. Donc, ça nécessite beaucoup de moyens. Il y a également les agropoles. Il y en a au total 5 agropoles. L'agropole la plus avancée est celle du Sud. Là également, il faut que l'État intervienne en amont, puisse créer les infrastructures publiques et permettre au privé, qui sera porté par le fonds 6, le Fonds souverain d'investissement stratégique, pour mettre en place les investissements privés. Donc ça également, c'est une priorité. Dans la souveraineté alimentaire, il faut également aménager les terres. L'aménagement des terres, ça nécessite également des financements, des moyens, et après accompagner le secteur privé pour venir s'installer dans ces terres aménagées, produire, transformer et commercialiser afin de permettre à notre pays non seulement d'avoir la souveraineté alimentaire, mais de créer de la valeur et de créer des emplois massifs. L'énergie également, c'est une priorité parce que pour qu'un pays soit compétitif au plan industriel, il faut que l'énergie en tant que facteur de production soit accessible, soit fiable, avec un coût abordable. Et cette semaine, hier, le 6 et le 8, on a même tenu une table ronde avec les partenaires au développement, mais également avec le secteur privé, pour mobiliser les financements nécessaires pour l'accès universel à l'électricité en 2025. Ça également, c'est une priorité. Et je vais mentionner un point important que vous avez relevé tout à l'heure. C'est important d'essayer de résorber le gap infrastructurel. Mais ce qui se passe souvent dans nos pays, c'est qu'on met en place une infrastructure sans pour autant qu'en amont, au moment de la conception du projet, qu'on intègre l'aspect exploitation de l'infrastructure pour au moins permettre que l'impact positif qui était attendu soit au rendez-vous. Donc, intégrer cette dimension dans la structuration, c'est un point très important. Nous en sommes aujourd'hui conscients et c'est pourquoi nous commençons à travailler avec le Fonds 6 pour structurer l'exploitation de beaucoup d'infrastructures, notamment le marché d'intérêt national et la garde des gros porteurs. Donc là, aussi intègre cette approche dans sa démarche.
Mr. Ndiaye, thank you very, very much, Mr. Ndiaye. I'm sorry if I interrupted, but I've just been told that I need to hand it over for the next session. But I think the point you made mustn't be forgotten, and that is that there is so much more we can do. We've just started with you, and we intend to engage further on all those various projects, because that's how we like to operate. That when a country becomes a member, we look at projects and take it from there. Thank you so much again for your time, sir. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Sanjeev. And thank you to Mr. Aliou Ndiaye, Director of Cabinet for the Ministry of Economy, Planning and Cooperation for Senegal, representing Amadou Hott, the Minister of Economy, Planning and Cooperation, and also Mr. Solomon Asamoah, CEO of Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund. He was representing the Minister of Finance from Ghana. Excellent representatives, as were the excellent speakers in your previous panel, and you too for a great moderation. Sanjeev, thank you very much for that. Now, you've heard the case studies and the country members, so let's hear from AFC itself. I have a quartet of its leading executives for you to help articulate what AFC can offer its members. Now, when AFC's Executive Director and Chief Investment Officer, Oliver Andrews, retired last year, he left some pretty big boots to fill. In February, AFC announced that it had found the right mix of experience and knowledge in Mr. Sameh Shenouda. Almost 30 years of experience in investments and fundraising in international capital markets with a focus on infrastructure. He was most recently the CEO of Zaru, which is the infrastructure developer owned by Blackstone. Sameh, I invite you to tell us a little about AFC investing in country. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you for the nice introduction. I joined AFC 3 months ago, so I have the benefit of sharing with you the view of someone who still knows AFC from the outside for many years, but also from being on the inside. And I hope that my perspective would give you a good perspective for the countries who are already members and know the story on the inside, as well as the potential countries that are looking at AFC from the outside as well. And what I can say is that what I have known about AFC from the outside has been confirmed when I joined, and it's even more impressive when I now when I have joined recently. AFC is a leader and an enabler in unlocking economic development on the continent through infrastructure and industrial solutions. What I would like to do in the next few minutes, and I'm conscious of time, is to give you a bit of a quick overview of our mandate and our strategy and our view going forward. The breadth and width of our mandate is impressive. We pride ourselves of operating in most sectors of infrastructure, of being agile, of being flexible, entrepreneurial, but at the same time being disciplined and very rigorous. Our core sectors are mining, power, oil and gas, telecoms and technology, transport and logistics, and heavy industries being the key drivers for economic growth on the continent. We have the unique ability to play across the capital structure. We can, and this is one of the rare things that we can provide, which is early stage greenfield development. As Solomon mentioned before, we don't only take the early stage project development risk, we also bring our expertise and our experience, our knowledge, our relationships to bear to help countries develop their infrastructure projects from as early as a greenfield or a concept all the way to development, financial close, construction, operations, and successful expansions if need be. We can do equity, we can do quasi-equity, we do debt to the private sector, we lend sovereigns, we lend ministries, we provide solutions to governments generally. We can do more than one product in a single investment or a single transaction. We also have the flexibility of operating in different project sizes. So we can do projects that are as small as $30 million, but we can go all the way to $250 million. We can lend short-term debt, and we can go to very long tenors up to 15 and 18 years sometimes. So all these ingredients of sectors, size, and the different financial tools, as well as our expertise put together, puts us in a unique position that I don't think anyone on the continent has. And our track record and our pipeline speaks for itself. As we move forward, we are very conscious of many changes that are happening in the world, and we see ourselves as leaders to progress and grow our strategy and expand the definition of our mandate to capture and lead in these sectors. So for example, in power, we will continue to develop baseload gas assets, but we have also put together a strategy to build sustainable, renewable projects and put together a platform of 2 gigawatts as a target in the next 5 years. Africa has good resource availability, and we see ourselves as the best suited entity to support the building of renewable projects across Africa, whether these projects are wind projects, solar, or hydro. Also, digitalization technology. We have seen during the COVID year how technology has become extremely important. This symposium is a very clear example of the use of technology as opposed to in the old days where people had to travel and meet physically. So the backbone of technology in Africa needs to be served. It needs to be enhanced. And we think we have the ability to do that. And these these type of projects could be anywhere between data centers, financial inclusion, e-commerce type projects, e-customs, and logistics, etc. In transport and logistics, again, we will continue to grow our ports, roads, and logistics platforms like Arise, and we've seen the case study on that. But we also want to focus on areas where we think there is a gap that needs to be filled. The example of the vaccines for COVID and the cold chain that is needed to distribute these vaccines efficiently, that is non-existent in some countries in Africa, has made us realize that there is a space there that urgently needs filling, whether it's cold storage for food or for vaccines and medicines. Liquid storage as well is and bulk storage are quite important areas for us. E-logistics, so the Amazon's type of companies that need warehousing, need the technology to have an efficient logistics and warehousing is an area that we will focus on in the next years. Also, finally, product solutions where we can support sovereigns and ministries where we lend them to help them develop projects, whether they are healthcare projects, transport projects, or power projects. And then corporate and trade finance are also areas that are growing significantly quickly. I want to end with a few examples of projects where we partnered either with governments or with the private sector or both. So in Ghana, for example, we've partnered with Solomon's entity, Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund, to build the Takoradi port project. In that project, we invested equity, mezzanine, and senior debt. We have seen the example of Arise that we not only have supported Gabon to build an economic zone, but also have grown the platform to cater for not only ports but also special economic zones in Gabon, Cote d'Ivoire, Mauritania, Benin, and Togo. But this is also a very good example of crowding in private sector money, where we attracted companies or infrastructure, international companies such as AP Muller and Meridian and a few others. So we see this as quite an important part of our mandate as well, is to demonstrate the success and the potential of African projects and attract third-party capital to come into the countries as well. We've talked about the Djibouti wind farm, and the chairman of the company has spoken to us. This is the first wind farm in Djibouti. We, because of our agility and our flexibility, we decided that we will do this project on a full equity basis, and once it is constructed, we will raise the debt. This has saved at least 2 years of project finance efforts that would be done in a typical project. We've talked also of the 300 megawatt gas power plant in Senegal, which is quite critical to the country. I want to mention 3 final examples that are extremely important. We have very recently provided sovereign debt to the government of Cote d'Ivoire, primarily to help them develop their road program. We have provided debt also to the government of Tanzania for water, social infrastructure, and transport projects. And then more recently, we have partnered with the Nigerian government to form InfraCorp, which is an infrastructure, it's a unique infrastructure fund, which is co-led by the Central Bank of Nigeria, who are our largest shareholder as well at AFC, and the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority. The initial seed capital is 1 trillion naira, which is about $2.5 billion, and expected to grow by 15-fold in the next few years. And in this fund, we will deliver public and private sector projects from origination through construction, through portfolio management, all the way to exits. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Samir. I know from reading some of your reactions when you first took the job that one of the things that excited you about joining AFC is the fact that the AFC, even before you came, has been working more closely with sovereigns in deeper partnerships. Some of the ones you mentioned, the transaction in Cote d'Ivoire in February is a good example, and the collaboration with the government of Nigeria on its infrastructure fund, Infraco, you just mentioned. Let's hear about sovereign lending now from AFC's Senior Director of Investments, Ato Yassi. Ato, are you there?
Yes, I am, Mark. Good afternoon to you and to all our esteemed guests. So traditionally, AFC has been almost exclusively focused on private sector-led projects, and typically these have been in the form of project financings. But we do recognize that government ministries and state-owned enterprises play a very large role in the development and provision of infrastructure. And so our offering now includes sovereign lending. If you can please put up the slide as I carry on. So in this regard, I think next page, please. Okay, excellent. So I think the first point to mention is that we are able to support new infrastructure and infrastructure-related trade projects undertaken by governments and state-owned enterprises. And we are also able to support the refinancing and reprofiling of existing facilities for debt management operations. Now, as you may be aware, this is quite unusual for a typical development funding institution, but we believe it is quite important for AFC to offer this solution to our partner countries, because in many instances, those assets have been financed with tenors in the region of 5 years, which creates quite a large mismatch between the useful life of the asset, typically anywhere up to about 30 years, and the debt servicing capability of the country. I should point out, though, that we are only able to consider refinancings for instances in which the original loan was used to finance identifiable infrastructure or infrastructure-related trade assets. A good example of this is a facility we raised for SIR, the crude refinery in Cote d'Ivoire, and I will discuss this briefly later on. The second point to highlight relates to country of origin restrictions. I mean, AFC is a very proud supporter of local content and an advocate for Africa's industrialization. And so we are able to consider funding for all contracts so long as they have been issued in a transparent manner and in compliance with the relevant local laws of the borrowing country. Moving to the third point, now, as we all know, Africa's infrastructure funding requirements are enormous, and there is only so much that AFC can do on its own. And so a key consideration in everything we do is how to mobilize additional funding from our funding partners. Now, for example, in the last 18 months, AFC supported sovereign programs have and continue to contribute to the development of over 3,000 kilometers of roads. When we mobilize money from our partners, they pay particular attention to the nature of AFC's relationship with the country. And for example, whether or not we have preferred creditor status. And this is one of the reasons why we strongly encourage our members to finalize membership and ratification so that we can do more for you. The next point of interest is that we are able to support you in the area of unfunded participations. We know that there are many instances in which our country members have to meet certain unfunded commitments. This may be letters of credit or performance bonds. And it is well documented, unfortunately, that in comparison to peers from other regions of the world, African borrowers tend to pay a very high premium for borrowing because there is a perception that the risk is higher. AFC is able to support our partners in this area by using our very strong investment grade rating of A3 from Moody's to guarantee obligations under those types of instruments. The idea being that if AFC guarantees your underlying borrowing, it is likely that the market will be willing to offer you longer tenors and cheaper pricing. The last thing I wish to highlight, though, is that we are not a concessional lender, nor are we a provider of grant funding. We believe that the scale of Africa's funding needs requires access to multiple pools of funding, and that partnering with AFC allows our member countries to access long-term competitively priced funding, and that together we are able to deliver sustainable long-term solutions that have high economic and social returns. In the interest of time, I will skip to the next slides very quickly. I mean, they are self-explanatory and can be picked up. So the first one is SIR. I mentioned that briefly. It's based in Côte d'Ivoire. It is West Africa's largest operational refinery, and it is of strategic importance because it is the largest company in the country by revenue, and also increases certainty of supply of refined products and energy security. The refinery had built up quite a high number of payables for a number of reasons, and we were asked to come in as MLA to restructure and reprofile the debt burden. We were able to mobilize approximately 577 million euros of long-term debt from a combination of local, commercial, and international lenders. Now, as I mentioned before, it is very difficult to do refinancings with DFI, so we had to exclude them. Repayment on the facility is based on escrowing of funds from a levy that SIR receives on sale of refined products in the country. And so there is virtually no reliance on the fiscus whatsoever. And this facility continues to perform very well. The next slide, please. This is a structure we use to raise funding for one of our member countries. In many ways, it is a vanilla structure, where we lend to the Ministry of Finance for on-lending to the underlying project. The trick here, though, was there was a very urgent need for the funding to close the construction. And so we staggered it with multiple closings. We closed the first one of 200 million very, very quickly between AFC and a local bank. And then we staggered the rest in order to give more time for the market to mobilize. So I'll stop here, Mark. I hope this has given the audience a decent overview of what we are able to do, and we look forward to working with our country partners.
Thanks, Atto. Can I ask, though, the next few speakers to try to stay on time, because I noticed we've got some really interesting questions coming into the Q&A box, and I'm just worried that we won't have time to address them. Now, when it comes to currency fluctuations, FX volatilities, these are very choppy waters that can threaten even the most robust deals and projects. Protection, I guess, is paramount. AFC offers a number of instruments to clients, such as FX and commodity hedging, currency swaps, and leveraging AFC's good credit rating so that it can offer guarantees to countries. Banji Fehintola is the Senior Director and Corporate Treasurer at AFC, and he'll tell us more about Treasury Client Solutions. Banji.
Thank you, Mark. And I think my colleagues Sami and Atto set the scene by explaining some of the products that we offer on the lending side. But in addition to what we do on the lending side, I think what sets AFC apart compared to other MDBs particularly is the fact that we also do have some unique solutions that we can offer, that complement what we do on the lending side. And so we have a Treasury Client Solutions business, which I'll just talk briefly about. I think Mark has done a good job in summarizing what we do, so I'll just talk very briefly about what we do. I'm aware on this call we have sovereigns, we have central bankers, we have corporates, commercial banks, everyone on the line. And I think we have a solution for all of you because you all fall within our client base when we look at our Treasury Client Solutions. We typically get asked, as people in the financial market, that what keeps you awake at night? And that's all about risk. What risk are you thinking about? And so for us, in summary, what our Treasury Client Solutions business will do is to take those risks off the table and allow you to plan and be able to run your business focused on what you do best, while we take care of the other things that you should not be worrying about. We have a few slides, so if you just move down the slides, the key point is risk. There are so many market risks that we face as international investors, as sovereigns, as central banks, and part of those will be things like foreign exchange risk, and that's largely because we do lots of cross-border transactions on the continent. So as you would expect, foreign exchange risk is a major risk for us, be it an exporter or importer or whatever it is. We do lots of financing, whether in hard currency or local currency. Interest rate risk is always extremely important. And it's something that could make a project that was otherwise viable to become unviable with time. Commodity price risk is extremely important as well. I mean, Africa has lots of commodities. We've seen so many things today with Gabon, with so many other countries, oil and gas. And so the issue of commodity price risk also becomes extremely important when we're planning for our business. We can move to the next slide. So the question is, how do we offer these solutions? Several ways. There are so many products. Again, this slide just summarizes some of them and tries to highlight some of the things that we have done with some of our counterparties on the continent. Currency swaps are a powerful tool. We use this typically for central banks that are trying to manage their reserves by providing them access to hard currency, which stabilizes their earnings and helps them to be able to, manage the flows of hard currency within their countries. So we've done that powerfully with so many central banks, some of them at the bottom, Central Bank of Nigeria being a key one. We've done it with corporates, we've done it with banks. And so this is a tool that's available whereby we can take the local currency off you, provide you with hard currency, and then you can use the hard currency and then give it back to us at some time in future. So I think this is quite important for people who are looking for hard currency liquidity, and you have local currency liquidity, and you're looking for a partner to help you provide you with the hard currency against the local currency. So AFC itself is a good partner there. Bank of Ghana, Central Bank of Egypt, Angola, Tanzania, there are ongoing discussions with so many of these central banks across the continent for us to provide similar solutions to them. Next slide, please. On interest rates, this is extremely important. Again, we all borrow and assume that rates will never change. I mean, I was looking at the trajectory of LIBOR recently. I know LIBOR is going off, but LIBOR currently is about 20 basis points, all-time low. People think it will continue forever. But at some point in time, LIBOR was almost 11% in 1989. And there's nothing that tells us that rates cannot go back up. We're at the bottom of a cycle. So definitely rates could go back up. So one of the things we would do is to offer solutions to clients to fix their interest rate exposure at this point in time. Again, with that way, you can plan for your project, forgetting the fact that rates may rise because you already have a counterparty that has guaranteed you more like an insurance on your interest rate. So several products there, interest rate swaps, caps, and other derivatives. AFC has the ability to offer this to clients. Last but not the least, I would talk about commodities, which is the next slide. Again, like I mentioned, Africa has a lot of exposure to commodity price movement simply because we do have lots of commodities on the continent. And so when commodity prices go up and down, that tends to affect government budgets. It tends to affect, the finances of many countries and many sponsors. So one of the ways we can offer you solution is to offer the certainty of pricing when you look at some of these commodities. And we use crude oil as an example. I mean, we've done these structures effectively for some clients whereby we've helped them manage their crude oil price exposure using put options. In some instances, it's deferred. The premium on the options are also financed as part of the project, etc. So I guess the message I want to leave to people listening to us is why AFC? A couple of reasons. One is the fact that I think we understand your needs, and that's evident. It's very important. We operate on the continent. We are providing financing on our balance sheet. So we do understand the continent and we understand your needs. Secondly, the structuring expertise we bring to the table is unique. Because we understand your needs, we can customize the solutions to address those needs. Thirdly, high credit rating. I think my colleague Ato talked about that. We can intermediate between you and the financial market and get to best pricing in order to manage all the risk that you face. Some of these risks you may not even have access to the capital market directly, but coming through an AFC helps you to manage a lot of those exposures. And last but not the least, I just think is our unparalleled access to capital markets. Again, on the back of our credit rating, I think we've built a team that has very good access to capital markets and financial markets. So as a result of that, we can pass a lot of that benefit to all our clients. So in summary, we've done quite a number of transactions. I know there are so many examples to share. I will not talk about those today. But if you are interested in reaching out to me, I would be very happy to have one-on-one calls in order to discuss this subject a lot further. Thank you so much, and back to you, Mark.
Thank you very much there. I keep hearing this word partnership and collaboration. And just looking through some of the chat, there's some wonderful, very warm messages coming from partners. AFC says, a message from ADB, comes, it says, we cherish our relationship with AFC and will continue to partner in the industrialization of the continent. A lovely message there. Also another one from Afreximbank, who says, excellent symposium. Sorry, that one is from Malam Suleiman Yahya. He says, excellent symposium. I commend AFC President Samaila Zubaira and the leadership for clarity of vision and strong execution credentials at this abnormal times, growing a balance sheet by 100% in a pandemic, highlighting that significant impact is the way to address Africa's infrastructure crisis. A great message there. And there was also a message from a Freximbank team. They're congratulating AFC on this enlightening symposium too. They say they look forward to a continued strong partnership between our institutions on trade-enabling projects, as well as projects which promote industrialization and strengthen healthcare across Africa. Some very nice messages there. I'm going to go to our last AFC voice, an important one, because this gentleman is responsible for this symposium. His team has been working, burning the midnight oil for this to happen. Now, we know that country membership of AFC increased significantly recently from 6 members at inception to 31 members as of March 2021. More than half of the countries in Africa are now members of AFC. Most recently, AFC welcomed its newest members, Morocco, DR Congo, Burkina Faso, Republic of Congo, and Mali. Now, to shed some light on the benefits of AFC membership is Dr. Ini Ura, Senior Vice President and Head of Country Relations. Dr. Ini, you've got the floor.
Thank you so much, Mark. Let me join my voice to that of the chairman and our CEO to welcome all our member countries, our potential member countries, all our partners and potential partners. Let me use this opportunity to welcome or to invite all African countries, the remaining African countries, to join us in AFC. Why is it necessary, or why is it important? My colleagues have talked about it from the project front, but being a member country of AFC brings a lot of benefits to the countries, because one, as you have seen what my colleagues have said, they'll be able to invest more in the country. There'll be a higher headroom, advisory, project development, and we can actually encircle you with that. And being a member country also has benefits for AFC. I think you heard Banji, you talk about going to the capital markets to raise financing. The more we have country support, the better it is, because then we'll have a higher rating. And we'll be able to mobilize resources at very, very low rates. And whom does that benefit? It benefits our countries. It benefits Africa as a whole. So let me use this opportunity to invite you to join membership. And I think I need to stress, for sovereigns, being a member country or joining the AFC membership does not cost you anything. We don't believe that countries should pay or subscribe to join AFC. 2, we don't also require you to pay annual renewal fees. So membership for sovereigns is absolutely free. All you have to do is take a look at the AFC constitutive documents, review them, discuss them, and then approve them at the cabinet and so on and so forth. Thereafter, after joining, then you can actually ratify it. Because when you ratify it, that is where the biggest bang comes in terms of benefits for AFC. That is also where the biggest bang comes in terms of benefits for the country. 2, after joining the membership of AFC, we also encourage countries to invest in the equity of AFC. And investing in equity of AFC is not mandatory, but we encourage you because it is absolutely beneficial to you. AFC, right from inception, has been paying dividends. The capital that you will invest appreciates. For example, when AFC started operations in 2008, the capital of AFC was at around $1 per share. Now it's almost $2. So you can imagine if at all you came in up there, already your capital has doubled. But more importantly, you get dividends, and dividends, 50% of all the net income is distributed, and it's quite sizable. And I think if you doubt me, talk to our current shareholders who will be able to tell you that it is good. You've heard from African Development Bank. African Development Bank is a shareholder. Badia is a shareholder. Africa Re is a shareholder. We have Gabon, we have Ghana, we have Guinea, we have Central Bank of Nigeria, and then we have Tier 2 capital from America. And we have a range of products that you can come in. Recently, just to make sure we cater for countries, AFC has created what we call the callable capital. And I'm sure, and I know, because I am an ex-African Development Bank staff, that African countries are very, very knowledgeable about investing using a callable capital instrument. So we have a callable capital where you can actually use it, and then the capital may be called at some point in time. And so I invite you to do that. And for our partners, especially the pension funds, the institutional investors, our development partners, I also invite you to take a closer look at us. Take a look independently, and then let me talk to you again later on how you can invest with us. Your investments will also enable AFC to strengthen its activities, but not just strengthen its activities, to actually be able to make more sense to the continent and to the partners who work with us, our partners who intend to work with us. I think I'll stop here, but please, my information is available. I invite you to get in touch. I'll be able to engage you, and you can engage me as well as engage my colleagues to make sure that you understand us. I want you to understand us. Don't know me, understand AFC, understand what we are all about, understand where we are going. That way, we can join hands and make Africa the pit and the Africa of our dreams. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Dr. Ini, and thank you to my other AFC colleagues for shedding some light, for illustrating and articulating the opportunities and the advantages of AFC membership, partnership, and collaboration. Now, Sierra Leone is one of the founding members, one of the founding member countries of AFC. And so we're delighted to invite the Minister of Finance for Sierra Leone, Honorable Jacob Jusu Saffa, to speak. Are you there, Honorable Minister?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I'm here.
Honorable Minister, your ministry's engaged with AFC on a lot of initiatives, hasn't it? Including the establishment of the Sierra Leone Investment Fund and the structuring of a prepayment facility that supports infrastructure development in your country. Now, my question, I guess, is how do you compare the structure of that prepayment facility with other traditional funding methods? And also, it's a double-sided question as well. I want to know if crystal ball gazing into the future, are there any committed plans to also invest in AFC? You have the floor, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark, and thank you very much to the other panelists for inviting me to this great symposium. Yes, Mark, indeed, we are in long discussions with the AFC for several facility opportunities. For the past 12 months, about 12 months ago, I discovered that the AFC is the way to go if we have to feed the huge infrastructure gap in Africa. I mean, and AFC is even more important with the dwindling reduction, with the dwindling with the reduction in official development assistance to develop to Africa. And the one way we have to go about it is to look inward, look at our institutions within the Africa settings, institutions that can customize solutions, as someone said, to the African realities. And therefore, as a government, we're particularly concerned, we're particularly ambitious and passionate about the AFC. To that end, the president himself paid a state visit to Gabon. We saw that AFC investment in Gabon with some of the panelists, Gupta, Gagan Gupta, and the other guys who are on this forum. We are all present there. We are highly impressed. And as I speak to you now, we consider this prepayment as the best way forward for several reasons. One, it reduces government contingent liability because of the structure of financing, which we are discussing. Secondly, it brings in investment almost immediately. Then, more importantly, it brings knowledge on the table, knowledge, particularly in terms of private sector resource mobilization. So to us, it's a way to go. We need resources for critical infrastructure development, and AFC that understands the Africa context is the best way to go. The contingent liability working with the AFC is far better, and we do not see the bureaucracy so much involved in the AFC when you compare to traditional partners. And I must end by saying that AFC resources is supporting private sector as opposed to traditional resources that support public sector projects. That is the high point of the AFC's support. And just to let you know, we are far advanced with the discussions now in government. The cabinet paper is being drafted. I'm taking the cabinet paper to subscribe to AFC. So hopefully in the next 2 weeks, I should be able to pass through that through cabinet, some subsequently parliamentary ratification. So we're very proud to be a founding member of AFC, and we are prepared to subscribe and prepared to take the discussion on prepayment arrangement forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the honourable representative there from Sierra Leone, a stalwart member of the AFC family. I believe we have one last guest, special guest standing by. Equatorial Guinea is not yet a member of AFC, but they may soon be. We have with us Mr. Robustiano Eyegue, who is the Director of Hydrocarbons, Equatorial Guinea, Ministry of Mines and Hydrocarbons. Sir, are you there? I don't know if I have you with us. I was looking for him. I've not been confirmed by my team whether or not he's joined us. If you can hear me, please, please say something, sir. No, I don't think I have him with us. So I think what I will then move on to, unless he turns up, and if he does turn up, we'll bring him in. So I'll move on to the Q&A now. I know I promised that I would take questions. There are quite a few questions there, and I'll try to get through most of them if I can. This is a question, I think we'll go to Samaila Zubairu, President and CEO of AFC. I'm going to ask you a double-sided question, Zubairu. The first is from Cedric Longange, Chairman of the Congolese Chamber of Commerce in Great Britain. And his question is, what main opportunities have emerged for AFC, and I guess for the member countries it supports, following the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFC? So what main opportunities have emerged for AFC following the implementation of the AFC FTA? And the second question, I'll give you two in one. How does AFC work to ensure local content is fully integrated into their projects and to ensure knowledge acquisition and retention within the sub-region is obtained? So how do we skill up from all this? That's what Salifu Ba wants to know. So Mr. Zubairu, you have the floor to answer those two questions, sir.
Thank you very much, Mark, for excellent facilitation so far. And also thanks to the gentleman from the Congolese Chamber of Commerce for his question. So I'll start with the first one. So you know that infrastructure is required to move goods and services. One of the major benefits of infrastructure is its ability to move goods and services. And you need to move goods and services for trade to take place. I'll give you a quick example. So we know that the infrastructure deficit that we have on the continent, makes moving goods much more expensive, and it takes much longer. So if you wanted to export a container from the port of Alexandria in Egypt, it would take you probably 12 days. It will cost you about maybe $1,600. But if you wanted to export a container from Central African Republic, it would definitely take you over 7 weeks, and it will cost you over $7,000 to be able to export that container. So that tells you the importance of infrastructure. Additional to that is the fact that you need to have the goods that will be traded within the Continental Free Trade Area, which is why we're very keen, and we encourage African governments and sponsors to focus on value addition of African commodities. You've heard about Africa's share of the world's minerals, over 30%, leading position in most of the world's minerals. But these minerals and commodities are just exported in their very, very crude form, which is why we always have this boom and bust cycle anytime there's volatility in commodity prices globally. We believe that the way forward, and we think this is the moment for Africa, is to focus on value addition of its resources. So a combination of the transport infrastructure that is required to move goods and services, the industrialization that's required to process Africa's commodities, as well as a commitment from governments to make it easy for goods to flow. So for example, we have the ECOWAS Trade Treaty, and we have some movements of goods within the region, but it's not as effective. So we need to understand what are the limitations and how we can improve on that, so that within the wider African continent, it is far more efficient. On the question in relation to local content, we believe that only Africans will really develop Africa. The example of AFC demonstrates this. So we've always had development finance institutions on the continent, but they were always waiting for you to come to them with fully baked, bankable projects. And we know that that doesn't really exist. So AFC is an example of African taking ownership of their destiny and working to ensure that we deliver for our people. So at AFC, we will work with governments, we will work with sponsors to transform the ideas to bankable opportunity. We will ensure that all the elements of bankability are in place for the projects to be bankable. So likewise for local content, any government that has a local content policy and makes room for its entrepreneurs and its institutions to participate, we would work with them. We work with everybody that wants to invest on the continent, but we make special emphasis on local content. I give you an example. The government of Senegal had a clear program to ensure that the power plants in the country that will be developed after a certain threshold will be done by their local citizens. And we work with those local citizens to ensure that we delivered the project. In fact, we did the development of that project with them in less than 2 years. A project that would typically take 3 to 5 years, we delivered in under 2 years, working with local Africans. And we're doing the same in several other jurisdictions. So we believe that our work with Africans is very important because only Africans will develop Africa.
Thank you very much, Samaila. I'm going to quickly move on now because I understand that Robustiano Eyegue, the director from the Ministry of Mines and Hydrocarbons, Equatorial Guinea, is now with us. Sir, you're very welcome. Can you hear me? Your mic might be off. If your mic is off, I know they've migrated you to the panel. So if you can hear me, please indicate. I see you. Your mic is actually off. If you just hit your mic and put your mic on so we can hear your voice. Your mic is still off. Your mic is on now. Okay, so we'll hear you now. Can you say a few words? Let me hear your voice. Make sure I can hear you.
I can hear you very well.
Wonderful. You're very welcome. Now, sir, I know you've been listening intently to some of the speakers when they've been talking about this relationship with AFC and what it means to them. Could you tell us how you see Equatorial Guinea partnering with AFC to support your development goals? In particular, maybe you could talk about Equatorial Guinea's drive to diversify away from oil and gas. Do you see AFC as a potential and natural partner to support that kind of agenda? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mark. Let me be short. Equatorial Guinea is always planning to intensify its growth opportunities and attract investment. To attain economic development, any country needs more investment and production. However, the crisis caused by the COVID pandemic and the recent collapse of the oil price has challenged our financial sector and has led to much debate on how best we can achieve sustainable development. Following this event, and considering AFC track record that I was following, I believe Africa Finance Corporation can play a huge role in economic development of Equatorial Guinea and may support the country development ambitions by, for example, facilitating and encouraging the inflows of foreign capital, as well as optimizing the allocation of the same capital. With more capital investment, we'll expand, and this will speed up the economic development of our country. Last but not least, I believe that AFC can also help with the growth of small and medium-sized enterprises by providing them with access to finance. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. It's good to have you on board and good to hear the commitment going forward from Equatorial Guinea. I'll take a few questions if I can, just a few more questions. This question, this question came through about, you saw earlier that video about the Arise project in Gabon, the excellent project, and heard Sanjeev's wonderful panel that were articulating kind of what that means. This question is actually directed to Olam, and I understand that we have Alan Saraka from Olam is going to step in to answer that question. So Alan, stand by, because this is your question, Alan. The question comes in that says, how do you evaluate and mitigate environmental, social, and governance, ESG, I suppose, environmental, social, and governance risks and opportunities with such a complex and huge projects? That's a question for you. And there's a second one. It's also said, oh, well, I'll just leave it at that one. That's probably enough. Alan, if you can hear me, if you could answer that sharply, please.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, indeed, it's critical to mitigate this risk by doing the proper analysis of the environmental and social risks, and mostly we define our environmental and social policy. And the most important thing is to ensure that the investors and all the stakeholders involved in the industrial and economic zone comply to those policies and comply with the best, this policy is aligned with the best international standards like the AFC, the AFC standards. So this is how I can quickly address this point. So we ensure that we comply and we meet the best international standards, and investors in the industrial zone do the same. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I have to unmute myself. People are really loving this dialogue. Salifu Ba says, fantastic dialogue. Africa should jealously guard the development of the continent, and there is no better partner than AFC. There is a question that came in about healthcare. I'm just trying to find it here. I think I've lost it. Oh, there it is. Yeah, this question was interesting from Jay Brown. Jay Brown wants to know, in this period of looming health challenges as a result of COVID-19, what can AFC do to help build health infrastructure across Africa? Samaila, this one's for you again. Back to you.
Thanks, Mark. That one is a challenging one for us because healthcare is not currently in our focus area, but it's something that we're looking at. We're looking at it because the pandemic has revealed its importance, and we would look at it. So going forward, we're looking at some pilots. There's a project in which we hope to collaborate with the African Export-Import Bank, and that could be one of the first pilots for us to look at healthcare. But we have another way of supporting African governments that seek to improve healthcare, which is through our sovereign lending facilities. Through our sovereign lending facilities, African governments can develop healthcare. And as soon as we do a successful pilot, on our own, we would see how we can extend our mandate, to cover that very critical an important aspect of our development going forward.
Thank you, Sumaila. Now, I think if looking at the time, I think we're more or less out of time. We're over, in fact. So I'm going to have to wrap this up. Sumaila, I'm going to go, I think, back to you for the final remarks. I want to just say you're always fond of saying AFC is Africa's infrastructure solutions provider. I personally want to know, what does that really mean to you? Maybe in your closing remarks, you can intimate. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mark. I would like to thank our shareholders, our board, our management and staff and all the people that have participated in this forum, for joining us in this very important symposium. So AFC being Africa's infrastructure solutions provider is really speaking to our mandate, which is that we know we have significant challenges in relation to the infrastructure deficit on the continent. And we know we have a very challenging operating environment as a result of the deficit. So the whole idea of being a solution provider is that we come to this with answers. We would find the reason, we'll find the way to make things happen. And we know that this typically happens by a collaboration and partnership, with the various stakeholders for appropriate risk allocation. So all investments really is about managing risk, and what we try to do is to make sure that we understand the risk and we allocate it to the most responsible partner that can deal with that. So that's really what we do about becoming solutions provider. It is taking ownership of Africa's development, working in partnerships with governments, sponsors, and our various funding partners across the globe. We've been able to access funds, from China, Korea, Japan, Europe, America, and Africa itself, mainly from Africa itself, for our development. So it is these partnerships that we'll continue to embark on going into the future. I'd like to leave with a few words or a few key messages. So one of the biggest challenges we have is around risk perception. So Africa's risk is unduly magnified. There's a general perception that Africa is a very risky environment. There are risks on the continent, but it's much larger than painted globally. So there are several studies that indicate that Africa has the same risk for project finance transactions, which is mainly infrastructure financing, like Western Europe. The risk for project finance defaults in Africa is much lower than America and Asia. The only region in the world with lower project finance default risk is the Middle East. So this risk perception on the continent needs to be properly addressed. We can also see that from the expectation of how the COVID-19 would ravage the continent. It has impacted us, but not on the scale that most people anticipated. So going forward from here, we want to encourage African governments to take responsibility in developing the continent, working with partners like AFC and other development partners across the globe to ensure that we do proper risk allocation. This is very important because the only way things get done and the only way we can mobilize capital is for us to ensure proper risk allocation. Now, a lot of the investors globally want this risk managed, and we typically do that through our structuring as well as through insurance. Now, typically you would expect that if you have low risk, the premium for doing business should be lower. Unfortunately, that's not the case for Africa. So what we would like African countries to do is, as they engage with development partners across the globe, especially with the EU, DFID, and various other forums that they have around development on the continent, they should make this case that perhaps this government should consider insurance for their local investors to come into Africa as opposed to aid. So if they look at their aid envelope or their aid wallet, they should allocate maybe 20, 25% of that for insuring investors within their continent to come into Africa. And there are several programs for that, and we can work with them to ensure that that happens. We think this will be a critical enabler for mobilization of funds into the continent. Again, we thank you all for your partnership. We will continue to work with you to build the partnerships that are required to accelerate development impact for our people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President CEO of AFC Samaila Zubairu there. And I want to also thank the organizers and everyone that has made this seminar, this symposium possible. No one ever says thank you to the interpreters, so I'm going to do that and say thank you to the interpreters. It's a very difficult job, actually, that is often goes unheralded. But most of all, you're very welcome. Most of all, I want to thank the members, and I want to thank those organizations, countries, and those partners that we have that truly believe in AFC and realize the value of partnership and membership with AFC. I strongly urge you to get in touch. The bedrock to any good relationship is communication. So let's accelerate our communication and start to speak with each other and contact and find and explore ways that we can work together. You know, of course, we'll be reaching out to you via email, but you can also visit the website. The address is www.africafc.org. That's www.africafc.org. You see it there on the screen. I want to say that officially concludes this symposium. It's been a pleasure to moderate it. I am Mark Edo. I'll say goodbye now. Until the next time, goodbye.